for your viewing. With all that said, I am going to turn this over to Anita, and she will take over as presenter in just a moment. Should be all Anita.
Thank you. And Jackie, be certain that you put up the PowerPoint.
Do you see that now?
I do not.
You may have, okay, I apologize. You may have to click across those tabs across the top of your screen, right above your whiteboard.
I did do that, and it doesn't advance. We had it there, but now it's gone. I mean, we had it earlier today.
Well, there's one tab that'll say whiteboard, and then to the right of it, there should be another tab that says suggestions.
Okay. At the top or the bottom?
At the top, just above the red writing.
Dear one, it is not there. So on mine, it does not show up. I have nothing that says whiteboard. So, oh my goodness. Okay, I went to a different tab, and maybe we can do it here. Okay, I still have not been able to do this. I have a whiteboard tab, but I don't see how I can bring it up myself.
Okay, there should be a tab to the left of the whiteboard tab.
Yes, that says suggestions.
If you click on that, that should be your PowerPoint.
All right, yay. Luckily, these are my friends that are on here. So as I look through your names, of course, we have all been together for a week. And some of you for many years. We have people from Alaska, and we have people from Nebraska, people from Oregon, people from Michigan, people from Illinois. And I was laughing because at least two of these states are ones that have said, just say no to the Common Core, though they're being used in many of your schools. So I welcome you. Just to let you know, we have this webinar, and we're doing 2 more this year, and then you're going to be invited to join the ones that we do next year. And I was reflecting on what have I been asked the most as I've traveled around our country, and basically it was, Anita, tell us, what should we be doing in terms of the Common Core state standards? And my answer always is, well, you know, teaching will help. Teaching will make a huge difference. But I want to share with you sort of some of the suggestions that I've been giving to districts, to state departments, and ones that I thought would be useful for you to carry out also. So if you have questions, go ahead and put in the questions as we go, and then I'll stop at certain points and answer all those questions. But as usual, I have more than enough content to cover in our hour together. So know that you've been sent both the PDF file and the PowerPoint file, so if there's any slides that are of use to you, they're available to you. So this is February 27th, 2013 webinar. I'm Anita Archer, met you before. And so here is the first suggestion, and it is really a reminder to educators that standards, whether they are the Alaska standards, the Nebraska standards, or the Common Core state standards, that they tell us exactly what we want the students to be able to do at the end of the year, but they intentionally don't tell us how they should be taught. And I think this is the challenge, because some people are thinking, we have to throw out good instruction because this is requiring something else, like discovery. And I have to tell you, the standards will not be caught. They will only be taught. The standards will not be caught. The standards must be taught. So the instruction that we know about needs to continue. So one day I was looking through the front matter of the Common Core, and they directly say that the focus is on results, not the means. So we, as educators, we are the ones that are going to supply the means. It just tells what we want the kids to know, not how teachers should teach. And these are also from the front part of the preamble of the Common Core state standards. That how we go about it is up to the discretion of teachers and curriculum developers. And I want to state that because some people believe the standards are a curriculum. They're not a curriculum. A curriculum would mean that this, not only did they say what the students had to have, but would have all the lessons necessary, all the examples that were necessary, all of the monitoring as we go. That would be a full curriculum. No. Standards are not a curriculum. They just say, here's where we want students to be, and you have to decide how you're going to get there, how you're going to teach it, the materials you're going to use, the curriculum you're going to adopt. All of those things are not included in the Common Core. I'm just so disturbed sometimes when people say, well, now we're not going to be using our core reading program anymore. We are just going to have them follow the standards. Well, then that puts the burden of curriculum design on teachers every day, and it's enough to deliver good curriculum. Many of the core curriculum we're using right now can be perfectly modified for meeting the Common Core. And so, obviously, I was in Kansas. I was in Wichita the day that I was working on these PowerPoints, and basically the Common Core tells us the destination, like we're off to see the wizard. It just doesn't tell us how to get to Emerald City. It just tells us where we are going. And that is what we as trainers in explicit instruction that we need to be helping people do. That's the first thing I just want to remind people is that the standards say where we're going, but they do not tell us how we're going to get there. It's sort of like this analogy. A great nephew was getting his driving permit. And so he went in, took the test, and then got the pamphlet that said what is he going to have to do on the driving portion of it. And it listed everything that he's going to have to do. He's going to have to parallel parking. I told him if he couldn't, just find how many points are taken off. And he is going to drive in traffic and on a freeway and be able to drive on one-way streets. But it doesn't say how we're going to do it. It just says where we're going. See, how we're doing it is we are taking you down to the high school parking lot, and there we shall practice for a long time, and long before we take you on that one-way, long before we take you on that freeway. That is how we're going to get you there. This just tells you what you have to do. Well, the next question and suggestion is that we're going to have to use all the evidence-based practices to get to this destination. So here is the next question. I often get, I have so many teachers who feel like overwhelmed by the verbosity of the standards, and they just don't know how they're going to get to those standards. And we talked about this very briefly in the summer, is that we have to make the standards teachable. And we have to condense and integrate the standards so that we have a way to convey them to teachers that says, woo, I can do this. So I am working on doing a lot of these, but I'm going to share with you a few just to give you this idea. Because to me, this may be the reason that you came on today, is to look at a way to convey these with ease to teachers. So let's start with this example. Literature in the first grade. And what I have done is I have highlighted the action word in the actual standard and underlined the content. Okay? So they're all organized the same from kindergarten through 12th grade. So they have comprehension ideas and details so that the kids can ask and answer questions about key details. And then they can retell stories with information on the key details as well as the central message, and they can describe the characters, the settings, and the major events. And then under craft, they can identify words that convey feelings and explain the differences between different passages they've read, as well as between both expository materials, informative, as well as narrative. And that they will be able to identify the narrator and use illustrations to describe the characters, the settings, and the events, and be able to compare and contrast adventures of the characters in these stories. So notice again, to do this, I highlighted the action word and underlined the content. Well, let's look at this in its simplistic form that would be teachable, that would appear doable to the teacher. So one little slide for literature in the first grade, that there's some actions that the students are going to take. They're going to answer questions, they're going to ask questions, they're going to describe, they're going to identify, they're going to retell. And the content that they're going to ask questions about and answer questions about and describe and identify and retell are the details, the characters, the settings, the major events, the narrator, and the central message. And they're going to be able to compare and contrast elements of story, this character to this story, this setting to this story, as well as narrative and informative text. Now, you look at this and you say, oh my goodness, this isn't so different than everything we've done in the past in terms of literature, whether it was read-alouds or passages that we read. It's basically story grammar, different ways the students are going to respond, and being able to compare elements within and between stories. Doesn't that look doable? And that is what could be our gift as leaders in education to all the teachers that we work with. Now, I included 3 more examples to show you something else, and that is, if we do this, we can also see these subtle changes across grades. So pop along with me, and here we have 3rd grade writing. And across all of the levels, they're going to write opinions, or it's a later grade argument. They're going to write something that is informative, or they sometimes refer to as informational text, and narrative. So opinion and informative and narrative. And then they give the standards for carrying out those 3 genres. And again, notice the highlighting. So they first are going to organize and respond to a task and a purpose. And I'm sort of surprised. Look at 5. You know, this really isn't a standard. Basically, what the people in the Common Core said is the students are going to use the writing process. They're going to do planning, revising, and editing. And then they're going to use, with some support of adults, technology, both to produce and to publish their, whether it's an argument or informational text or narrative. And then they're going to do some short research projects, and they're going to use within it information from experiences, print, digital sources, and they're going to take notes, and then they're going to sort their information as a way to plan how they're going to write that. And they're going to write for some extended time and some shorter times. In response to a task, like write a paragraph or write an essay, a purpose, to convince, opinion, to convey an experience, narrative, or a purpose of being able to do an argument to convince. And they're going to have different audiences. Well, how could we condense that? Take that and funnel it down, keeping the essence, but making it even more powerful for teachers. So look at this. So here we have the tasks. They're going to write often, long, short and long, for different tasks, audiences, and purposes, and the purposes are to convince, to inform, to convey an experience. So these are the tasks that they're going to do. They're going to write often, short and long products. And they're going to use a writing process. They're going to plan, they're going to gather information from personal experiences and resources and digital. They're going to take notes, organize, write, clear and concise, not a stream of unconsciousness, use technology, revise, edit, and rewrite. Now, again, just think about if you were a teacher, as many of us are, that we look at this and we say, oh, well, isn't this doable? Oh, yes, this is doable. You know, it's the same thing we do with children. We take what's complex, we funnel it down to something that is powerful, that maintains the essence, and appears doable. Exactly the same thing we do with teachers. We take what appears to be complex, we make it into a simpler form that can be easily conveyed. But I wanted to show you how this is also powerful in terms of looking over time. And so I did the same thing with 5th grade. Now, I'm not going to go through every detail here, but 5th grade, same thing. Let me go back one. Same thing. They're basically having the same types of genre: opinion, informational text, narrative, though, of course, the complexity in 5th grade would be greater. And then we have these standards, and subtle things are altered within the standards, but we could end up with the same type of summary. They're going to write often, long, short and long, for different tasks, audience, and purposes, to convince, to inform, and convey. And they're going to use the writing process. But you'll notice that there's some details that are added based on what they have outlined. But it's still plan, write, revise, edit, rewrite. Now, I did it one more time, the 7th grade writing. But I did one more addition, which I didn't do earlier, but we should do, is that first they list the genre, and like this is the first standard in 7th grade, which is on an argument. And they list underneath it wording that is not breaking it down, but rather telling you what would be a good argument at this grade. So it's really important that we attend to this, because basically this would formulate a rubric that we could use. So that it says in the standard that the students would have a claim. Okay, notice it's not a thesis statement. We're going to have to get the language down here. It is a claim, and it has clear reasons and relevant evidence. And then basically they expand on it. They say that in the introduction, you're going to introduce the claim and any opposing claims, and you're going to introduce the reasons. And then in the body of it, you're going to have logical reasons that support that claim, and you're going to use relevant evidence and credible sources. And then you're going to have transition words that will link it all together, and it's going to be in a formal style, and then you're going to have a concluding statement. So for each of the genre, opinion, narrative, and informative, they have a sort of an idea of the rubric. And then they introduce the remaining standards, which are very parallel. And so you can read these later to yourself. I know you'll be thrilled to do that, but the same kind of highlighting. So let's hop over to 28. Look how similar it is. Routine writing, some for extended period where you get to do research, reflection, and revision. Shorter times for task, audience, and purpose, and for the purposes of to convince, to inform, and to convey an experience. So teachers looking at this, like, I see this being very useful for like a special ed teacher who says, you know, I have to support 3rd graders, 4th graders, 5th graders, 6th graders, 7th graders. But luckily there's some consistency here, though the rubric might change in terms of what we're looking for in terms of the genre. Much of the tasks are very much the same. And looking at the actual rubric. So let me go over first. Let's go to the process. Go over to 30 for just a minute. So you'll see that the process of plan, write, revise, edit, rewrite, and publish is the same big steps as in 3rd and 5th and 7th grade. But what has happened is they've added some details, like under planning, that you're going to use multiple credible sources, including both print and digital, and there's going to be evidence from literary as well as informational text, and you're going to take notes, and you're going to organize it, and then you're going to write. And when you write it, you're going to have clear, coherent writing, and you're going to use technology. Okay? And so, again, we can line these up and see just subtle changes over time. But what I added here is something that is very useful, and that is to use the standards to have a rudimentary rubric, because all of this is pulled right from the standards, that there would be an introduction that gives a claim and has counter-arguments and organizes the reasons. And in the body, there will be claims as well as counterclaims with logical, relevant evidence using transitions. And there will be a conclusion. And overall, it will be logical and formal and coherent, and no plagiarism, thank you, no. And there will be appropriate conventions. But now the teacher's saying, well, okay, so we have certain tasks, and we have a process we're going to use, and a rubric that should be the outcome. Now I say to myself, ooh, I can do this. And this is what teachers are clamoring for, is for us to take what appears to be complex and funnel it down till they say, yes, I can do that. Well, I keep being asked, well, are you going to do this for all the standards? Oh, if I only had time, but I might have to make it a priority. I've had some people in different districts and some state departments say, well, let's do this. So I might have to have a standards party in order to do this. But can you see the benefit? If we did nothing else to help out our teachers, I think this would be a really fine place to start. Now remember, if you have questions, you just type those right in, and we'll occasionally stop and respond to those. Well, I'm going to go rushing ahead because I have like the totally gifted group here. And the third suggestion is, you know, the standards need to be broken down into obtainable steps. And we talked about that last summer. In fact, the example that I have here is just a reminder of that discussion, that when something is complex, that the students have to have the chance to have it broken down so that each part of it is obtainable leading up to the whole. You know, I had a perfect example of this. Last week I had the same respiratory infection that is going across our country, so I had a week in Portland, Oregon, versus where I was scheduled, which was Wichita, which had more snow than they've ever seen before, and I was so glad I was in Portland because it was like spring-like. But I was working on a new piece for my cello, and it goes not just from first position, but it uses fourth position. And so I started playing, and I said, Anita, this is too complex. You're going to have to break it down, and you're going to have to do it in small bits, because you right at this moment are first faced with cognitive overload, more than I could handle. So I took and said, all right, I'm going to just sit down with a piece of music and write in the fingerings, particularly fourth position fingerings, which I've never done. And then I'm going to put it into segments, and I'm going to just practice that segment. I'm not going to do the whole song. No, no, no. I am just going to do segments of it. Well, luckily the song was Amazing Grace, and Amazing Grace means we break it down into obtainable parts. And so you'll remember the example from my work with Mary Gleason with the program that we're still working on, which is Rewards Writing, where we looked at teaching kids to write an argument essay. And we broke it down into obtainable pieces. We didn't have them in one day learn how to write an essay that was an argument. Instead, we started with just teaching them when we gave them a plan with a reason and the details, that they would be able to transcribe it into a paragraph. And then we worked on having 3 reasons with the details. So they had the reason and detail, reason and detail, reason and detail. And we practiced, not with them having to plan it, but we gave it to them, transcribing it into connected discourse with transitions. So we reduced the cognitive load by giving them the plan and then having them write it. And then we did planning just the body, just planning the body and doing transcription. Here's a position, what are your reasons? Then here's a position, what are your reasons, and your details for each of those reasons. And then we wrote up 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. And thus we had the body of an essay, not overloading them with the introduction and the conclusion. No, not at this moment. We're writing 1 body, 2 body, 3 body, 4, 5 body, 6 body, should have been more. And then we went to teaching them how to write an introduction, grab the attention of the reader, state your opinion, and preview the reasons. And we wrote 1 introduction, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we did the same with conclusion, wrap it up. And so we practiced different kinds of conclusions, and we wrote 1 conclusion, 2 conclusions, 3 conclusions, 4, 5 conclusions, 6 conclusions. And then finally, they were able to do the standard. But, you know, if we just look at the standard as taking my nephew to the freeway and having him drive in commuter traffic, you know, he would die. And so will our students, because it's more than they can take in and process. We need to break it down into obtainable parts. So first big idea is be certain that, let's just go back and review them for a moment. First big suggestion was, okay, going way back, is be certain that we focus on the standards as what we need to gain, not how to get there. And number 2, be certain that we convey to the teachers that we have made this more teachable so that you can convey it. And boy, if any of you want to work on some of them and send them to me, I'd be glad to give you feedback. That would be fun. Then we'll put them all together. And then the third one is, if it's complex, break it down. Well, going up for just a moment, we come to the biggest suggestion of them all, and that is teach. You know, it's a time where we're spending so much time on the standards, but not enough time on the instruction that is necessary. And I just keep remembering and reminding people is that these standards will not be caught, they must be taught. And we have all of the research from the last 30 years on explicit instruction. And so in your next slide is just a reminder of some of the big ideas from our summer training. So I'm going to have you respond so that you are totally present. So we looked at design of instruction, and we looked at, 1, focusing on the critical content, and then breaking things down into obtainable pieces, and then providing systematic instruction, for example, using, everybody, I do it, we do it, you do it, excellent, or in vocabulary, utilizing, I introduce the word, I introduce the meaning of the word, I provide examples, I check for understanding, and coupling the good instruction with judicious practice. You know, we have many curriculum materials that will emerge that have like 1 lesson per standard, have not integrated them at all. And you know, that's not going to be enough. You're going to have to write 1 essay, 2 essay, 3 essay, 4, 5 essay, 6 essay, 7 essay more in order to be a good essay writer. So they're going to have to increase the amount of practice. And then we're going to get frequent responses and constantly monitor the students, provide them feedback, and have a brisk pace. So I know that so many of you have gone out and have been doing training and showing teachers how here is a standard, here's the materials that we have, and let me show you how to teach a lesson that is related to the standard using our curriculum materials. And I absolutely applaud you for that work. We've got to keep people focused on what makes a difference, and what makes a difference is we teach and we teach and we teach. We teach from bell to bell to really make a difference. And our intent has to be learning, not just getting through the period, not just being entertaining, not just presenting information, but actually having learning occur that is related back to these standards. We have so much work to do just on this one slide. We cannot give up. Well, much of what I've been asked, because maybe it's my expertise, is asking questions about reading and writing. So I want to share with you what I've done in terms of reading, and then I thought big ideas I would do writing the next time we met, which is April 5th. You know, it was chosen because it was a day that I was at home. In fact, why am I home that day? Well, I am home that day because it's my birthday. So we'll celebrate with a webinar on that day. So let's move ahead. Now remember, I haven't seen any questions yet. You have questions, pop them in there. Because now we're going to leave the big ideas and we're going to go to what I've been asked and how I respond to the Common Core in relationship to the area of reading. So the first thing is, and I'm concerned about this, is that I'm reminding people that all of our work through Reading First and all other initiatives on ensuring that our primary students could read by the end of 3rd grade, that we cannot set any of that aside, that the foundation skills that we all know are necessary for students to have a high ability to comprehend in the later grades cannot be set aside, even though they might appear to be a footnote in the Common Core, that the foundation skills come after the standards. We have to ensure that the students have these, so we cannot leave the path of great instruction on foundation skills. This is just a visual reminder. In the end, we want the students to be able to comprehend both literature and informational text. And the major standards in reading are divided up that way. Comprehension of literature and comprehension of informational text. But if they don't have phonemic awareness, the ability to blend sounds together and segment them, and they don't know letter-sound associations, then they're not going to be able to figure out the pronunciation of unknown words, and certainly they're not going to be able to handle what is often a major challenge for older students, the ability to figure out long words. Then they're not going to have fluency, whether it's accuracy, rate, or expression. That all lead to comprehension. And we can't wait to teach vocabulary in 4th grade and above. We have to teach vocabulary from the get-go in preschool and kindergarten so that the students have a wealth of vocabulary that supports their comprehension in the upper grades. And yes, we have to read informational text to primary children. That will also give them some background knowledge. So I'm just so concerned that we might lose our path. We've lost it before. But you're out there just saying, now, hold on. We want kids to be able to comprehend informational text, that they read, and to read they need phonemic awareness and decoding and fluency and vocabulary and background knowledge. Let us not lose sight of this. Let us teach it to mastery. Let's ensure that the kids have it so that there will be comprehension hope later on. So that's my first message in terms of reading in the Common Core. Now, if we were to look for a major change, it is the emphasis on informational text reading. And so I have had the great gift of doing many presentations in the last year on informational text reading. And sort of my suggestions that would go along with the Common Core in terms of comprehension in this area. And so, as you know, informational text was given a lot more emphasis in the Common Core. For example, and this was based on NAEP, but this is sort of the expectation that in fourth grade, 50% of all the materials that students read would be informational text. Now, that does not mean that the core program has to be 50% informational text. No, the students should have a social studies book, a science book. And same thing when we look at eighth grade, even more would be informational text. Critical, though, it doesn't all have to be in middle school and in high school in the language arts class. No, we've got to have science text, science articles, social studies text, health textbooks. There's a huge amount of reading that needs to be informational, and it doesn't all have to be in language arts. I get this constantly. The language arts teachers say, but what happened to novels? And, well, they didn't say we get rid of novels. That is the content of a language arts course at the middle school or high school, but we're going to be certainly having lots of informational reading. So this is, I put this slide in so you'll be reminded of it right from the Common Core that says, just remember, it is not all in the language arts course. And so I've included this in all my presentations where English teachers are present so that they will know that the Common Core does not say your class has to be all informational text, but rather, this is sort of my view. Let's look at it from the secondary position, that in the language arts class, that informational text might be read in relationship to literature. They're going to read a novel that occurs during the Revolutionary War. Well, they might want to be certain that the students have background knowledge on the Revolutionary War, thus read informational text on that. They might want to use it if they are going to teach informational text strategies, which I do think that the teaching of comprehension strategies is a major area for language arts teachers and transferred to content area classes. And if the kids are going to write arguments, then we might have informational articles that we read that gave them information that they could pull and put into their arguments. So there's a definite place for informational text reading, but not the entirety of language arts classes. In content area classes, though, I'm working in a number of districts in middle schools, and the amount of reading in science and social studies is very little. Well, that can't happen. The Common Core is saying we must be reading in science and in social studies so that the students have many possibilities of reading informational text. So we've got to get back to text. Many of the classrooms had textbooks, but the teachers were never using them. Thus, the students aren't learning the informational text standards that are required in all of our standards, whether it's the Common Core, Alaska, Texas, Nebraska, Utah, but still, they have to be reading in text. So what else might we want to focus on? This is, to me, the next one, suggestion number 7, is one of the major sort of debates around the Common Core. Particularly when it first came out, there was a suggestion that we should not do any front-loading, no preparation for reading informational text. Well, you know, given the impact of teaching vocabulary and background knowledge on comprehension of the text, the effect sizes are extraordinarily high. 0.95 was one effect size for if we prepared the students front-loaded by giving them information and what it did to their comprehension. You know, we just really can't afford to say something that makes that much difference we're going to skip. But we can say this. I think that what happened is that the authors of the Common Core were concerned that we often did so much front-loading that there was no need to read the text. But we need to do enough that the students will comprehend it. So I just took a lesson that I prepared for my teaching in Wichita, because I'm doing a project there. Having a wonderful time working in Wichita, about a week a month, and particularly right now in 2 middle schools. So I just want to teach a little bit to you, and it'll be a reminder of what and why we might want to do some minimal preparation for front-loading informational text that students are going to read. So you're going to be my students, so you're going to have to respond. Maybe you're in a small group. Some of you are all by yourself, but I want you talking out loud, okay? So be my students. Well, we're going to get ready for Chapter 11, which is the Jackson era. I want to remind you, we're not talking Michael, we are talking Andrew. And this chapter has 3 sections, and so today we're going to get prepared for reading the first section, but when we're all done, this is the main idea. So I'm going to read. When I stop, say the next word. The political system of the United States changed under Andrew Jackson. Right on. So that is the main idea, that the political system of the United States changed under Andrew Jackson. When we get all done, you are going to be writing a multi-paragraph answer to the question below. Reading it with me. What changes in the political system of the United States occurred under Andrew Jackson? So as you read all 3 sections and are taking notes on those sections, be asking yourself, what were some of the changes in the political system that occurred under Andrew Jackson? You know, our chapter is all about the leadership of Andrew Jackson as president, but it doesn't tell us very much about Andrew Jackson. And so I want to introduce some information to you, because when we read about a president, we can often link their decisions, their policies, to their own background. And so let's learn a little bit about Andrew Jackson. Here we have a picture of Andrew. And he is what president? The 7th, right? And of course, our current president, Obama, is the, tell your partner, did you get 44th? I should check that. It might be 42nd. Oh, no. Teacher needs to look that up again. I think it's 44th. So let's learn about Andrew. First, like many Americans, his parents immigrated from what country? Ireland, right. And so his parents came from Ireland. But did Andrew Jackson come from Ireland? Yes or no? No. Tell your partner how you knew he was not born in Ireland. Right. Because if he had been born in Ireland, he would not be our president. The president must be born in the United States. Well, 3 weeks before he was born, his father died in an accident. And so his father never got to meet Andrew, or Andrew meet his father. And his mother died when he was 14 years of age. And before Andrew Jackson was 14, both of his brothers had also died. So think about this. Is it possible the fact that he was an orphan, basically, at 14, would that affect in any way his decisions, his policy, his views as a president? We'll be thinking about that as we read. Now, let's learn a little more about him. He was also a military leader. In fact, remember, he was which president? The 7th. Okay. He was the first president since George Washington that had a military background. So at 13, he joined the Continental army to fight in the Revolutionary War. Wow. At 13, he and his brother together joined. And later his brother died from illness while he was a prisoner during the war. And then later, he became a general in the Tennessee militia. Now that's where each of the states has sort of their own army, not just a United States Army, but a Tennessee Army. So he was a major in it. And when the Creek Indians began to have battles with settlers in Georgia, he actually led a fight against the Creek Indians. I wonder if that's going to affect his policies later. And during the War of 1812, which we've already looked at, he was the leader of a major battle in the Battle of New Orleans, which of course happened in New Orleans. But this was against the British, and he had a major victory. And it was that victory that made him quite famous, that really paved his way to run for president. I'm asking myself, will his military background make a difference in terms of how he views the United States and the world, how he views policies? Well, here's another thing about Andrew Jackson. He was a politician, and first he was a lawyer. Now, at that time, you did not have to go to university to become a lawyer. No. Instead, you could study law books and go to a circuit judge, and the judge would ask you questions to determine if you had enough knowledge in order to become a judge, become an attorney. And so that's the path that Andrew Jackson took to being an attorney. But he was also the first president that served in every branch of our federal government. He was a representative from Tennessee. He was a U.S. senator, and he became a circuit judge, and then the president, seventh president. So I wonder if that's going to affect him, that kind of background, having been in the House of Representatives and the Senate, and part of the judicial system, and then president. Well, what else do we need to know about him? Well, he married Rachel Jackson. And, you know, there was actually quite a bit of controversy around his marriage because it appears that she may not have actually been legally divorced before she was married to Andrew Jackson. Okay, that led to a little controversy. And they had no children of their own, but 3 adopted children. Now, one of them was the nephew of Rachel. But 2 of them were actually Native American children. One of them, remember, he fought in a battle against the Creek Indians. Well, after the end of that battle, which about 400 Creeks were killed, one of the fighters that he worked with brought him a child that had been found, probably about a year old. Reports would say a year to 2 years old, that was on the battlefield. And the mother had been killed and brought him the baby. And he promptly, I'm going to adopt this baby, and sent the baby home to Rachel. And he was raised as Andrew Jackson's son. There's less information on the second Native American child that they also formally adopted. And then there were 8 other children that were nieces and nephews of Rachel that they also raised in their home, but were not formally adopted. So they had many children, but none of their own, except their 3 adopted children for sure. Isn't that fascinating? Well, here's another point of view. He owned a cotton plantation with 150 slaves on it. Now, this was before the Civil War, of course, right before the Civil War. Would that have an impact on his policies? And finally, he was involved in more than one pistol duel. And in one duel, he got very angry because a reporter had written some disparaging remarks about his wife, Rachel. And so he challenged him to a duel and killed the man. So that also is an interesting part of Andrew Jackson's legacy. Now, teachers, I ask you this. Would you not be more interested now about reading the chapter about Andrew Jackson? Might you not have a better way of looking at his policies towards the removal of Native Americans from Florida and Georgia and moving them west? See, I think background knowledge not only supports our comprehension, but is motivating, is interesting, and makes us want to read more, wants us to learn more. I mean, I had to read 3 books about Andrew Jackson just because, so fascinating. So there is a reason that I didn't take forever, but gave you some background knowledge. Well, that day I also told children that they saw Andrew Jackson all the time. If they go to the ATM, there's Andrew. In fact, the $20 bill has been referred to as a Jackson, but it's kind of a joke because Andrew Jackson, first of all, felt that we should have only coins, not paper money. And number 2, part of what he did, and one of his major policies, was to get rid of the National Bank. And so to have him on paper money is sort of an interesting little dilemma. Well, and also, there's some other interesting facts in here. We'll just whip ahead, though, about Andrew. But also teaching of vocabulary. So both of these, giving background knowledge to improve comprehension and vocabulary, have very high effect sizes. We don't want to skip out on vocabulary because the students aren't going to necessarily gain it just from the context clues. Navy studies showed that. Only 5 to 15% of words would you gain the meanings from the context clues only. So we got to teach it. And the possibility of misinterpretations is so high. Like suffrage. You think right away, well, it has something to do with suffer. Well, of course you do suffer if you don't have the right to vote, but it's not the same root. And so it is important that it be taught. So I'm going to teach this as a reminder to you of the type of instruction that we might employ. So first we introduce the word. Okay, be my students. The first word is suffrage. Say the word suffrage. Everybody put your hand on your table and tap as we say the parts of the word, suffrage. Now say the whole word again, suffrage. And here we have the definition bulleted out in terms of critical attributes. So first it is the right to vote. So when I have the suffrage, I have the right to vote. So we introduce the word, we introduce the meaning. And then we give them examples. So everybody, reading the first statement. I'm going to show you a new type of close, okay? So do this with me. And that is, I'm going to read a part of the sentence, and you're going to read to the period. We often are finding that this even works better than deleting a word. So I'm going to read the first part. When I stop, you're going to read to the end. I'm just going to whisper it so you know what I'm doing. Okay. When the United States was founded, only white men were property and suffrage. Okay. And so try this. So you're going to read the first part of the sentence, and then you're going to stop and train the students to read to the period. It often shows the relationship better of the understanding and preserves even the comprehension better, but also still does the same thing as close reading, keeps them on task. So back to being my students. So at the beginning of the United States, to vote, you had suffrage, the right to vote. You had to be white, and you had to be male, and you had to have property. So not everybody got to vote. Okay, and I'm going to read the first part of the next sentence. You're going to finish it to the period. At the time of the American Civil War, most white men had been granted suffrage. Okay, so during the time that Andrew Jackson was president, we're going to find that the right to vote was extended. It still was white men, but it was even white men who didn't have property. An expanded group. And let's look at another example. Again, I'm going to read, and when I stop, finish up the sentence. In 1920, women were granted suffrage. The passage of the 19th Amendment granted women the right to vote in all United States elections. Okay? And so, in 1920, then, suffrage, the right to vote, was expanded. My turn to read this, and read it with me, everyone. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 outlawed discriminatory voting practices that denied suffrage to many African Americans in the United States. Just for your own interest, today the Supreme Court are hearing arguments against changing part of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It's happening today, and many people are concerned about the lack of protection to certain populations. So we would teach vocabulary. And, you know, suffrage is a term that I cannot hope that kids just will have a 5 to 15% chance of learning. I want everybody to learn it, so there's certain words I'm still going to teach. So I included rest of the instruction here, but we're going to just whip through it. It was exciting, but the big idea was limited informational tech prep or front-loading in terms of background knowledge and in terms of vocabulary. And also previewing. This would show the preview we went through to see how the chapter was organized, this section of the chapter. Well, can you stand a little more? So another suggestion was, well, we should have some cold reads with no front-loading at all. But I just want to share with you, instead of making them all cold reads, oh my goodness, teachers and students would be frustrated. Let's be intelligent about this. And so here's exactly what we did. Now use that chapter. So we front-loaded and read section 1, front-loaded and read section 2, front-load read section 3. And then we had an article. Actually, it wasn't an article. It was actually the inaugural address of Andrew Jackson that the students read independently with no front-loading, writing down a column of what were the major things he intended to do. And in the other column, did he do it or not? What did he do exactly, or what did he choose not to do? Wow, that's very high order reading. But basically, the fact that we had done close reading on the chapter gave us an opportunity to read something cold. In other words, all of the reading up to that point was the front-loading that there was no specific front-loading. I think that's an intelligent and child method that is really supportive of our children. So we want them to read informational text. We want to emphasize that. We want to front-load, but not teaching them everything, so they still have to read. We've got to have them read in those content area classes. Now, I don't see any questions yet. Either I have like total clarity, or you just haven't stopped to put in a question, because I would stop now and answer them. So we have just a few minutes left, and I can pick up right where we left off the next time we meet on suggestions for reading. But I want you to let me know if this is going to be useful for you, because I think it's the same things that in your leadership questions you're being asked. And I just think that us focusing on them at least this time and then in April would be helpful. We didn't finish, but you know, I always have more than we can get done. So are there any questions? I'm going to see one more time if there's any questions that you have or comments. Go to that little chat box. Please add some so I can see that. Catherine Kathy, you and Eileen always have questions. Jessica, you always have questions. Sarah and Amy and Margaret, not one question out there. Well, let me just give you total permission to use whatever you find useful in this handout. And I'm just going to show you what's remaining, and we will touch upon some of them next time. So, as you know, the Common Core says do close reading. And so I went to everything I could find on defining close reading. It's rigorous, deep understanding. You have to know exactly what the text says. It has to be logical. You have to draw conclusions. You have to examine the meaning. Well, in other words, you have to read it closely. But this means that our kids are going to need strategies for reading it closely. And so I listed some here that we're working on, because I do believe that if you really want kids to look at it, then you must be able to do that. And so, Sarah, do you actually have a question there for me? No? Okay. So in the rest of this, you'll find some different strategies that I can discuss with you when we meet again, and then a reminder that we should ask higher order questions and that are text dependent, and that we might want to scaffold those questions. These, to me, if a district was going to pick for reading 2 things to work on, it would be 1, let us not lose the foundation skills, and number 2, let's put energy into informational text at a level that we've not done in the past. Those would be the 2 focuses in reading that I want everyone to work on. Well, now I'm looking down at my watch and it says I'm going to have to say goodbye to all of you. And I just looked through the names and it's just a thrill, even though I can't see your questions, even though I can't see you, just to know that Amy and Becky and Kathy and Diana and Eileen and Heidi and Jessica and Karen and Lauren and Lynn and Marge and Nancy and Sarah, and that you're all here doing very good work. And if I can help you in any way, I will be thrilled to do that. So use what you need here. Email me if you have additional things that you want me to cover next time, because I'm really going to make these work for you. So I'm going to put up my email address again in case you don't have it, and bless all of you. Thank you for all of your work. Our children deserve it. Our teachers deserve it. And we must always remember the standards cannot be caught. The standards must be taught. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita. What a great presentation. We did have one question that came up that I think in the shuffle, and they were looking for any resources that you recommend for teachers regarding the Common Core.
Well, you know, it's hard to say this because so many of the resources, I think, lead us the wrong way. I think we have to be extraordinarily discerning in terms of looking at them and asking, is this in concert with what we know about good instruction? Because when I've read books and I have read materials and I've read articles, they take us away from what we know that makes a difference. So I presume that might have been Sarah's question. If any of you have excellent things that you would recommend, email those to me and we'll have a list by the time we meet on April 5th. How's that? Jackie, would that work?
Sounds great.
We'll have everybody, if you have a great article or you have a great book that you think really does have really valid information that is going to take our children where we need to have them go, you send that to me and I'll make up a list that we can all share.
Terrific. Thanks, Anita. And just a reminder that we look forward to joining you guys again for the next 2 webinars at 1 o'clock Pacific time on Friday, April 5th, and then again on 1 p.m. on Monday, May 20th. We will get a link to you in the next couple days with the recorded version of the webinar if you want to take a look at a section over again. Thanks so much for participating.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a very good March.